Днес в бюрото на Константин Вълков имаме честта да разговаряме с Андреас Папандреу, който е водещ икономист, професор по екологична икономика в Националния университет в Атина. Има над 30 години опит в световни университети, като University College в Лондон, в Харвард. Неговата работа е фокусирана върху пресечната точка между институции, политическата икономика и устойчивото развитие. Той ще бъде гости на Delphi Economic Forum. Good to see you.
Good to see you, and thank you for having me on.
Let's start with this. You've spent 30 years analyzing how institutions succeed or crumble. Looking at the world this afternoon, do you see a global system in renewal or one in intensive care?
Любим модел на поколение от 1972 до днес. Произведен в Япония, новият Honda Civic, пълен хибрид с 184 конски сили е тук. С топ оборудване, безопасност от Honda Sensing, върхова хибридна ефективност и изключително пътно поведение. Може да е твой от 299 евро на месец. Тествай при най-близкия дилър на Honda. Honda – силата на мечтите.
Certainly today I see a world in intensive care, but I think there are, in terms of potential developments, there are green shoots of positive developments. Partly, given my own background in climate change, partly things that have been taking place before the recent geopolitical crises. So there was a momentum in developing in terms of finding ways of reducing our dependence on hydrocarbons. But no question that right now we're seeing a number of setbacks in terms of the overall international structure of, that was developed post World War II. The country that was deemed, with all its failings, as kind of the hegemon that was providing the support for important institutions of cooperation like United Nations, World Trade Organization, aid, all of these issues is turning its back on all these developments and on its allies. So we find ourselves in wars that we should not be having, and the crumbling of this level of cooperation and the geopolitical tensions is a major negative that we find ourselves in right now.
Your surname is synonymous with the history of the Greek state. Does having the historical lens make you more patient with the fast pace of the change today, or more restless?
It's hard to say. I think, as you say, we've seen many cycles in the past. Greece itself has gone through a major economic crisis and managed to go through one of the worst depressions since World War II. And it's managed to move ahead, so there are a lot of positive signs. So the long history does give me hope that there can be rebounds, there are cycles, and we can find new paths forwards. But that doesn't reduce the concern that I have of all the potential dangers. In some sense, we are at a moment of a turning point where there are a number of major risks, including as I said, climate change, including the risk related to artificial intelligence, including the dissolution of global cooperation. But there are also elements of finding new paths forward, especially if we manage to overcome the present crises.
You lead the political economy of Sustainable Development Lab. I was wondering, if sustainable development is still a viable goal in 2026, especially I should add some kind of geopolitics, because we are meeting just days after the fall of Viktor Orban, for example, in Hungary. As someone who studies the political economy of sustainable development, do you see defeats like this as a victory for liberal values, or simply an inevitable bankruptcy of a transactional regime?
Well, I think potentially a combination of both. We have seen there's been a receding of liberal values in the world lately. And that's a major cause for concern. But I think transactional types of populists and kind of cult figure politicians have a limited time frame in which they can function. They don't rely on a broader administrative structure, rules of the game, in which they can potentially have a longevity. They rely on clientelism, bringing in their own people, using administration for profit. Eventually, these things start eroding the efficiency of the administrative state. The inequalities increase, and eventually, I think the populist rhetoric and the cult figures lose their attraction.
You have spent 30 years, as we discuss, in academia, from Oxford to Harvard. What is the current academic perspective on how geopolitical shifts are impacting the so-called Green Deal, for example?
Well, I think there's no question that the new administration in the United States and the pulling out of the U.S. from the Paris Agreement is a major setback. Tackling climate change and achieving the net zero goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, the goal, the Paris Agreement goal, requires global cooperation to be achieved successfully and in time. So the fact that we're seeing a major country that's both been a linchpin of leadership on issues of climate change, at least on the side of its broader global leadership, because it's always had difficulties implementing these in terms of its own goals in the United States. But the fact that U.S. has pulled out is a major setback. In addition to that, there's a tendency of the U.S. administration and populists to turning an issue that is science-based and has generally had broad consensus across the political spectrum, turning that into a kind of culture war, as including anti-science, treating support of climate change as being worsening the situation of the individuals and the workers, and particularly the low-income sectors of the economy. Identifying that with all the culture wars of woke and so forth means that they're eroding to a degree the consensus that is required to attack these issues and the kind of values that you need at the level of people's own acceptance of policies that will actually advance the energy transition. So at that level, this is a major setback. We do have, on the other hand, while to a large extent the energy transition is perhaps the only unprecedented policy-driven transition. It has to be, we can't simply expect the energy transition to take place through the market. Historically, all energy transitions have largely been undertaken by the market with support by governments. But now, in the case of climate change, government policy has to lead, because there isn't a specific let's say, consumer good that makes the transition attractive to the market. So on the one hand, the setback that's come from the U.S. administration and from other populist rhetoric is a problem. On the other hand, technology itself, the developments in renewables, batteries, artificial intelligence, digitalization, information technology are making renewables competitive. In many respects, solar is already the cheapest form of energy. Mm-hmm. And we now have, of course, the competition between the electro-states, China and what is seen as a petro-state in the U.S. right now. So beyond the need for undertaking the climate change for the purposes of protecting ourselves, countries are becoming more aware that unless they follow through on the technology, they'll be left behind in a competition, whether it's electric vehicles, cheap energy that will eventually come from solar and wind and so forth. It's now turning into a market imperative. It wasn't initially, but it's turning into a market imperative. And perhaps that's going to be a major impetus. And of course, a security imperative as well, because we see that EU and the Green Deal, which initially was focused on the issue of transforming an entire set of economies to renewable energy and zero emission forms of energy. It's now turning that it's also a security imperative because they realize that having solar energy renewables is the best way to protect against the vicissitudes of oil, the crisis that we're seeing now.
But speaking about markets, you serve on the Bank of Greece Climate Change Committee. Is a central bank a strange place to save a planet, or the only place where, the numbers actually matter?
Well, no, that's a good point. It certainly sounded as a strange place when some of the initial initiatives were taken, both by Mark Carney in the Bank of England in the United Kingdom, who was a pioneer in undertaking climate change policy research within the central bank. And actually what happened in the Greek central bank after Sir Nicholas Stern's report in 2006 under the Blair administration that projected the economics of climate change, it happened to be that the leader of the Bank of Greece, the head of the Bank of Greece, along with a very well-known expert on climate change, came up with the idea of setting up this team in the Bank of Greece on determining the social, environmental, and economic impacts of climate change in Greece. At that time, it was seen as very innovative. As we've gone forward, central banks have realized that they have a key role to play. A lot of, to the extent that the transition takes place and we move towards renewables and the market doesn't follow in step, we might end up having a lot of stranded assets, oil companies that expected to make profits and suddenly their oil is not attractive, ships that run on oil and do not find themselves to be in tune with developments. So the central banks realized that we could end up having important instabilities in the economy if certain major assets were stranded. And as the leader, as it were, of ensuring stability within the economy and the financial system, that meant that they have to think of climate risks, physical risks, transition risk as being central, as being at least an important part of their agenda. And so more and more central banks are integrating these risks and providing oversight for the banks, the banking system, to the kind of rules it need. Some are much more aggressive and some are much more conservative in their approach. And there are different theories about how much the central bank should get involved. But I think everyone realizes that some role is critical in terms of central banks. So it ended up being a wise move at the time.
We will see each other in Greece and a Mediterranean nation. How does a country like this, or Bulgaria, or the region balance the European mandate for zero carbon with the immediate local reality of an energy poverty? Or put it in another way, is it moral to buy cheaper oil from Russia?
Clearly those are central and important political questions that kind of, there's an interface between a political question, an energy security question, and climate change imperative. In some respects, one would think that small countries that are more dependent on oil have less leeway to move on that front. And also their impact in terms of decarbonization on the global, in terms of their overall reduction of emissions for the global scale is relatively small. Still, I think the key is that within the European Union, it's important that there is support, cooperation to make that viable. Greece is getting a lot of funds for resilience funds and recovery funds, so that which are in line with the Green Deal, so that it can undertake its decarbonization strategy, its electrification to a larger scale, whether it's EVs and support for EVs and other areas of enhancing renewables. Also, it has major advantages in terms of the sun that Greece has. So in terms of the capacity for energy, both in terms of its own needs, but also in terms of exports. So I think there has to be a kind of careful balance between immediate energy security needs that have to be taken into account, concern about locking into hydrocarbons. So major infrastructure projects have to be really thought through, whether you want to develop dependencies that after the crisis blows through, you find yourself with stranded assets in that frame. And I think, I can't talk about Bulgaria, but I think even though Greece has achieved very substantial improvements in terms of its renewables, its decarbonization targets were fairly easy to achieve because of the economic crisis meant there were very few emissions. So it overachieved its decarbonization targets. It's overachieving its renewable targets as well, but I think it could do much more. So there's much more work that should think about infrastructure, for instance, on electricity distribution, much stronger impulse on electric mobility. And this could be both a part of ensuring its economy is innovative, it's competitive, it's in line with, so these are potential technologies that it could export. Solar energy could be exported, wind energy as well. So the focus for me should be a greater focus on strengthening the electricity, the renewables point. And that's an interesting contrast between, let's say, for instance, China and EU. EU was in the forefront politically in terms of addressing the climate change challenge, and has brought a lot of, sometimes seen as overburdensome regulation to achieve these targets. Ironically, it finds itself behind in terms of the actual development in the private sector of the technologies that are needed, both for its own transition to renewables and to the potential competitiveness in terms of exporting some of these abroad. So I think there's been one answer to that, and some are advocating that, is we should go slower on the renewable front. My own view is we haven't gone fast enough, and we haven't ensured that the market is strengthened in terms of the green energy push. It goes a little bit with Draghi's report saying that there are important areas where competitiveness has been hampered, but the green technology push actually should be part of the move forward in terms of the renewable revolution.
Finally, there are so many studies on how institutions fail. If you could redesign a Greek institution, one from scratch, but in order to survive the next 50 years, which would it be?
I think education would be my top priority. We have an amazing human capital in Greece, and we have very good educational institutions, but there are a lot of failings there, both at all levels of education. I can speak more at the level of university education and research. We managed not to undertake the kind of, as I say, kind of political decisions that will allow the release the forces of education in Greece, improve the quality of education, which will enhance research, but also develop the kind of culture that we need, because it's also a culture matter of teamwork, belief in institutions. If you're bringing out students that end up getting their degrees without the adequate actual work undertaken, they actually have less of a sense of the importance of academics and science. So good quality education both develops their skills, ensures that you have kind of the human capital for a competitive economy, and it also has to do a much better tie between the education system and the private sector. That's something that's been missing historically in Greece. Changes have been made recently, and we're moving in the right direction, but a lot more can be done.
So see you soon in Delphi Economic Forum. It was good to talk to you, and thank you for participating in the program.
Great to talk to you, and I look forward to seeing you as well in Delphi.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye, you too.
Любим модел на поколение от 1972 до днес, произведен в Япония, новият Honda Civic, пълен хибрид с 184 конски сили е тук. С топ оборудване, безопасност от Honda Sensing, върхова хибридна ефективност и изключително пътно поведение. Може да е твой от 299 евро на месец. Тествай при най-близкия дилър на Honda. Honda – силата на мечтите.